welcome to our webinar today, Getting to the Cloud. My name is Eric Layton, President and CEO of LoadSpring Solutions. And today we have a panelist, James Staten, who is VP and Principal Analyst for cloud issues at Forrester Research. And what we're going to do today is James is going to lead off the webinar today and give you some insight on what Forrester sees in the industry and trends, what's working, what's not working. And then I'm going to jump in at the end and give some real-world type exposure to some of the challenges we see moving to the cloud and what CIOs of enterprise-level organizations down to small construction firms see in the promise of the cloud, which is exciting. It's cost-saving, it's fast, faster deployments, as you'll see, but there are challenges there too. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to James, and I thank you guys for joining our webinar today.
Great, thanks so much, Eric, and thanks all of you for joining us today for this talk. So what I'm going to be covering here is really help you get a better understanding of what the IT organization can do to take more of a leadership position. I think all of you probably know, and that's why we subtitled this the way we did, that a lot of the adoption of cloud that's happening right now is driven by either business units or driven by developers who are oftentimes bypassing the IT department or simply just not telling the IT department what's going on. And that's very much what we see in the bottom line of cloud computing today. Majority of the adoption of cloud services has been the use of public cloud services by these individuals. These people are able to do this because they feel empowered by the solutions and services that are provided to them. They're usually designed to be consumed directly by these individuals. They're easy to add to a credit card, so they can simply expense the cost. They don't have to worry. They don't have to worry about what it's going to take to deliver this. And they don't have to worry about setting anything up. They simply turn it on and they're live. And this is really key to getting them to really adopt this solution in a very big way. On the developer front, it's being driven very much by what we call DevOps developers. So these are the developers who have enough operational skills, given how these solutions are designed, that they can be fully productive on these solutions by themselves. Now, when we talk about the role of IT operations, what do you do when an organization has gone around you and has bought these services, especially when these services move from being something they're just experimenting with to something that now they're actually going to turn into production value, something that is really something they want to sustain over time. So the key in this circumstance is that IT can't simply say, you can't do this. Too late, that's already happened. They have to say, what value are they going to add to this circumstance? In other words, if they're going to get the business or developer to recognize a role for the IT operations team to play in the use of cloud, they have to be able to prove their worthiness. So they're going to add value to the solution. That doesn't mean providing alternatives. That doesn't mean saying you should use what we have inside the data center. It doesn't mean trying to either say, no, you can't do this, or you try to control the use of cloud. What IT has to do instead is hope to facilitate this. And the key to that is to recognize that, first off, since you can't stop it, you have to understand how it's being used. And when you understand how cloud services are being used, you quickly find out that as an organization, you are already hybrid, which means that the SaaS applications they're doing usually are not being used in total isolation. What's typically happening is they're bringing this SaaS application in and they're connecting it to something running in the data center. And the moment they've connected something to the data center, you're now a hybrid. And the key question is, are you enabling this? Are you facilitating this? Is it adding value to your organization? And are you monitoring the use of this cloud service, monitoring the integration that's been done, and ensuring that your company is secure, that your intellectual property is protected, that your customer information is protected, and how do you ensure that that is the case going forward, even if it is not today? Now, a lot of organizations, particularly in IT, say, well, if we use cloud, is it cheaper? That is really a secondary question. The primary reason that the business units and the developers use cloud services is to achieve business objectives. They are trying to do it faster, they're trying to do it in a more agile way, and they're trying to do it in a way that they can control. Is it cheaper? Secondary. Oftentimes they don't choose these solutions because they're cheaper. And if they choose it for that reason, it's oftentimes because they believe it's cheaper, not because they've actually looked into it and they actually know that it is. Which means that if you try to make an ROI argument, you're probably not going to be very successful. It's critical that you understand what business value is being achieved first. That's going to be critical to the success. So let's take a look at what some customers are doing in the cloud so that you can get a sense of the business values they're trying to achieve. One of the organizations that aggressively is moving to cloud services these days are federal governments, state governments, and city governments. Here's just an example of a federal government, the U.S. Army. And in their particular case, what they're doing is test and development. Now, they're doing test and development on an incredibly powerful and massive application. It's called Moves. This is an application that allows them to programmatically analyze where their troops are in the field, where the foreign troops are in the field, and to be able to make the interpretation of where those foreign troops are moving, so that when they tell the generals in the field to move their troops and take that hill, that they know that they're not walking right into the enemy lines. Now, as you would imagine, that's a rather important application. As a result, they want to make sure this application works really well, scales really well, can move incredibly fast, but this is a highly secure application. So this is a test and dev initiative. The U.S. Army was testing this application on a public cloud using historical battlefield data. So they weren't exposing any classified information. They weren't putting any of our soldiers at risk when they did this. And when they were done with the test cycle, they would move the application back into a secure classified data center. Now, why do this test and dev in a cloud, knowing that you're going to put it into a classified data center later? Well, Moves is such a big application that it has its own data center. And the size of that data center is crucial to its success. And if you can imagine the challenge of sizing a data center, this is a $50, $60 to $100 million investment. You kind of want to get that right. You don't want to have too small of a data center, and you definitely don't want to have too big of a data center where the resources are wasted. By testing this application in the cloud, they were able to size the application through scalability testing. They knew exactly how big a data center they would then need to build, which means our tax dollars being spent more efficiently. Another good use of cloud, one that's actually more common, is software as a service. And this is what's happening here with this organization, with this application called TC3. This is a healthcare payment analysis tool that can be used by large and medium-sized enterprises that allow them to look at how they are using the healthcare system. Are they paying $500 for an MRI at this location and $250 for an MRI over here? Identify that difference and then make the adjustment by guiding their employees to the appropriate solution. Are they getting paid back appropriately by their insurance companies? That's what this product does. Again, this is an application with highly sensitive data, but in this particular case, that highly sensitive HIPAA-compliant data is going up into the cloud. So we are seeing organizations who are taking sensitive information and they're putting it in the cloud today, and that's part of the cloud maturity that we're experiencing up to this point. True with LoadSpring as well. This particular case, Alstom, is a French power equipment manufacturer who is using LoadSpring software to manage multiple projects, up to 30,000 projects, that include things such as ordering these products, installing them in the field, and servicing them after they're done. Obviously, that's very important intellectual property and customer information that they're managing, and they're managing it through a cloud-based off-premise service. Both NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange have been leveraging cloud services to provide greater service to the financial services community, but also to comply more efficiently with SEC guidelines. NASDAQ was one of the first to move and has multiple cloud services out there, mostly to allow people to get a better understanding of the market, to test trading algorithms, to test security algorithms, to identify fraudulent trade. All of these capabilities are empowered on public cloud services. The New York Stock Exchange did a private cloud implementation. They built a new data center in New Jersey, had some additional capacity in that data center, and used that additional capacity to allow mid-sized and smaller financial firms, hedge funds, and so forth, to co-locate their trading engines inside the data center where the New York Stock Exchange lives. This helps them comply with SEC guidelines when we talk about algorithmic trading. Because if you think about what the SEC wants to do is ensure that there is fairness between the very largest trading organizations, the Morgan Chases of the world, versus the small guys. And if Morgan Stanley builds a data center right next door to the New York Stock Exchange, they obviously get extremely low latency on their trades. So by New York Stock Exchange opening a private cloud solution where you can be inside the New York Stock Exchange data center, you get equal latency performance on those trades. So this is an example where they're using the cloud to improve their business, but also improve their compliancy. Now, next two examples, Nimbus Health and DDS. These are people who are going out to small and medium-sized medical and dental organizations and providing them with a cloud-based solution that helps them manage patient records, manage compliance, as well as maintain and manage relationships with insurance providers. Again, very sensitive data being put up in the cloud using a SaaS model. And then the last one here, Pathwork Diagnostics, also in the healthcare field, where what they are doing is they are doing analysis of tissue samples, cancer tissue samples, to analyze and identify what type of cancer they're providing. Now, in this particular circumstance, they do not actually do put the tissue samples up into the cloud, but they do build the database that allows them to do this analysis, leveraging the cloud to achieve that objective. Next, SaaS. Now, one of the things I want you all to understand is when your business units, when your developers go out to the cloud, they are not replacing your in-house systems. They are doing a complement. And this is another thing as IT departments really need to understand. If we already have a Salesforce automation system, if we already have an ERP system, if we already have a project management system internally, why are my business units going out and getting a competitive product and bringing it in and complement? You need to really understand what they're doing when they do this. They're not saying the in-house system is worthless and dead, get rid of it. What they're saying is there's a different business value they're trying to achieve. And that different business value is being achieved and is capable through a SaaS application. Now, what that means typically is it might mean that what you're offering internally does not meet the current needs of the business. That's something you should definitely look at. It might mean, though, that the pace in which new features and capabilities can be provided needs to accelerate. And that's oftentimes the case. SaaS applications typically have major new advancements 4 times a year or more and can bring out individual new features and capabilities every single week. That's very difficult for the IT department to do with a COTS application on-premise, where they have to evaluate new versions, which can take up to 6 to 9 months to verify they work with all the customizations that have been done. So that's why we see SaaS applications coming in complement. So that's a very important thing for IT to understand. You may be hearing from them, this is an Agile situation. This is a situation we can't deal with. We can't match. In those circumstances, maybe you do want to switch over to the SaaS provider fully. But you have all your history in the on-premise application. You might want to sustain that. So you may be having a dual solution situation for quite some time as you work through that. So what are IT departments doing, given that this shadow IT and this circumvention is taking place? Well, up until about 2012, they weren't doing anything about this. It wasn't something that they saw on their radar. They weren't paying attention to it. It was annoying, but that's about as far as it went. In 2012 and through now to 2014, we've seen an awakening by IT departments who are starting to say, yep, this is something we need to be thinking about. It's important that we have this on our radar and that we start planning to actually use cloud services ourselves and help the business units who are bringing these services in. Now, does that translate into executing on that strategy? Certainly did not in 2012. We are seeing progress, and it's good progress that we've seen through 2014, but we're still at only 30% of IT departments actually doing something about this, which means that if you're not doing something about it now, you really need to prioritize this in the year coming forward, because it's critical that you understand what is going on when the business uses these services, because these services are not going away. And increasingly, IT will have to play a role here if you want to protect the company's assets, protect the services, and continue to play a relevant role long term. And it's important that you also pay attention to the fact that a lot of the shadow IT that takes place is the result of what you see here in this chart. IT's reputation with the average employee has been declining over multiple years. Here you're just seeing 2012 to 2013. We continue to look at this, and we will look at this when our 2014 survey comes back. We have seen a consistent pattern since 2010 with the dissatisfaction of the IT department. This is interpreted in multiple ways. One, it's interpreted in, I don't need them as much anymore. Number two, they aren't responsive enough. Number three, they're too expensive. Number four, I don't understand the value they bring. These are all things you need to pay attention to as an IT department. And if embracing cloud, embracing SaaS services, helping the business use these services more effectively will help address this concern, jump on this. Make this a priority. When we look at what employees tell us about these cloud services they like, that IT doesn't either see as the value or doesn't deliver themselves, they come down to these three things. Employees go around the IT department like the autonomy they get from these services, at their skill set, with their capabilities, with their budgets for projects. They like the fact that they can sign these services up themselves. The second thing they like is the speed at which these services add new capabilities, add new functionality, and therefore they can deliver new services and values to their customers incredibly fast. Third, innovation. This can be interpreted two ways. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily creating new innovations on these platforms, although that is often the case with the developers who are using cloud services. But it can also mean that they like the fact that they get innovations from these platforms. These SaaS applications, these cloud platforms they tap into are constantly adding new features, as I talked about before, and that allows them to deliver innovation directly back to their clients. And as a result, we oftentimes hear regular employees say, when they hear the value propositions that are listed on this slide, they immediately associate those value propositions with cloud computing. If you want to be a relevant IT department to these audiences going forward, you need that interpretation to mean technology, to mean IT, and to mean you. And the only way you're going to get there is if you embrace cloud computing, not compete with it. So how can you do that? What's the plan that IT departments can take to boost their productivity and leverage cloud services? First step, try by empowering self-service to these services, which means building out an app store of the approved SaaS applications and the SaaS applications that are already being used in your organization. Second step, get an admin account or get admin control over these services central to IT for the purposes of two things. Number one, so that you can link them to your identity system and deliver back to the employees single sign-on. So get rid of your employees having separate IDs and separate passwords for all the SaaS services they brought in. Instead, let them tie that to the single identity which you're managing and you're securing and you're monitoring. This will be a value add to them because they don't have to remember all these additional passwords and they have just one login. Down the line, it also makes it easier for you to onboard new employees and allows you to offboard the employees when they leave as well, knowing that the assets remain with the company. Don't go with that employee who just left. The next thing you want to be able to do and why you want that central position is so that you can do business enablement. And what I mean by that is to be able to guide the use of the cloud service in an efficient way and a way that ensures that you can track how the SLAs are being met. You can ensure the security of the data. When they want to tie into additional services inside the company, you can manage those connections, and therefore you have a better ability to protect all of these new services and deliver the value that the business ultimately wants to achieve. It also allows you to manage the bill for these services and to identify and eliminate redundant accounts, as well as to identify when you need additional seats and when you've got seats allocated that, frankly, nobody's using. Once you're in that position, monitoring the health of the services, training the employees on the services, setting expectations with the employees about what they should expect from these services, what happens when they have an outage, what they can do, what role you play. then you're really unburdening the business units from managing and maintaining these applications. And that's when they really see the value you can bring. And then ultimately, you can manage all the connections between these services and your data center and your partners and any co-location facilities you're running. Once you're managing this complete hybrid state, then you know your data is protected. You know that you're able to see what services are being done, and you're able to see what employees are doing. Now, how hybrid are organizations today? This gives you a quick sense of about how hybrid people are right now. A large percentage of IT departments in particular believe that they're keeping a lot of their applications on premise, but acknowledge that there is a combination going on here. So you can see that there's a recognition, at least of 34%, that there is a combination of things going on in the cloud and outside of the cloud. Expect this to grow to 100% because we've already seen through survey data where we don't ask IT, but where we ask the business whether they're using outside cloud services, and it's about 90%. Now, the hybrid state is not just a service connected to another service. The hybrid state is becoming this common state of modern applications. So let's take a look at a modern application so you can get a sense of what we mean by this. A modern application that we're going to use in this particular case is a mobile application as the customer experiences it, but you'll see that it's much more than a mobile application in design. So the application in this case is a fitness application. I'm going out for a run. I put the iPhone on my arm and launch the application. It's going to track where I run, how fast I run, but it's a social connected application. And I'm going to run the same course that Bill did yesterday and Susie did the day before. And boy, would I like to have a faster time than the two of them. So this application is going to be using the GPS in the phone, it's going to be using the Wi-Fi, it's going to be using the connections that are there on the cellular network. It's also going to be using the heart rate monitor on my hand and a bunch of other application components. And I don't own those components as the developer. I simply tap into them through APIs. So my application is composite from the beginning. Now I'm going to be gathering a bunch of this information, but I need to interpret it, and I need to be able to report back to the runner how he's doing compared to Susie and how he's doing compared to Bill. And I don't want to give it to him when he's done. I want to give it to him while he's running. I want to be able to say to him, hey, looks like you've caught up to Susie, but Bill's got you by 5 seconds. Pick up the pace. And I want to be able to do this throughout the entire run and make it a really interactive engagement with the client. Now that's a lot of data that's going to be coming out of this particular phone. But what is going to make me want to think differently about my architecture is that it's not just one phone that's going to be attached to someone running in the morning. Hopefully it's going to be hundreds of thousands of phones using my application on this at the same time. And when I've got 100,000 devices sending out maybe 16K of data or 256K of data every second, I really don't want that information coming and flooding my firewall. So I'm going to build this application where all of that data goes up to the cloud, where I can set up a BI activity, where I can analyze all that data in real time, and I can get back to the runner and say, good job, you're now ahead of Susie. You can take a little bit of breather, or you can really try to go for a personal record. I want to do that in real time, and this is not private data. This is not person identifiable data, so there's no point in me putting security around it or bringing it back into the boundaries. Now, when this runner is done and he's finished his run, I want to say, congratulations. Do you want to post up to Facebook? But more importantly, if this person has hit, say, 400 miles on these shoes, those shoes are done. So let's take an opportunity to sell them new shoes. If they're going to get the catalog on the phone here, if they're going to log in, if they're going to give us our credit information, I might want that to go back to my e-commerce and to my ERP engine internally. And so I'm going to want to take that over a separate connection and a secure connection back to my data center where I can tie in to all of those back office applications. This is what modern applications look like. They're composite. They're structured so they take advantage of the cloud where it makes sense. They take advantage of third-party services where it makes sense. And they tie back into my corporation where that makes the most sense. When we build out applications like this, we have to recognize that this is a new application I gave you a picture of, but I mentioned before it's going to talk to the finance system, it's going to talk to the ERP system. So what about the legacy apps? How do they fit into the cloud model? Well, you probably aren't going to rewrite a legacy application and make it a cloud-native application. So how do you make it talk to the rest of the world? Well, we've already seen this movie before. We actually made this happen back in '99 when the web first came about and we needed to provide HTML interfaces. We took legacy applications and we actually surrounded them with web infrastructure. For older applications that had green screens, we used green screen scraping technology at the web layer to interpret that information and present it through HTML out to the web. The cloud is no different. In the cloud era, we need to speak REST to the outside services. We're going to build native applications around these legacy applications, and we're going to do unique integrations. And so legacies fit into the cloud era in the same way by putting a layer around them, a layer that does API management, a layer that exposes back-end APIs, a layer that empowers mobile user interfaces, and delivers some additional enhancements the legacy application itself doesn't have. And as you're building out enhancements to the application, you may find that certain capabilities, certain functions in the legacy application can be cached, can be read-only, or can be better developed today in the modern languages. As you look at these capabilities, you can actually shrink the exposure of the legacy application and the functions that have to go back to this legacy role. And that allows you over time to start to shrink the footprint of the legacy applications as you build out a more modern architecture and you build out a collection of more modern services and capabilities around it. This is a key move by the leaders in the IT world to be cloud-enabled, because it allows them to achieve their primary objective, reducing cost, being more efficient with IT resources, while at the same time empowering and enabling the agility of the business and their developers. The next thing the IT department needs to do is, since we're going to have to manage the hybrid state, let's have a clear picture of exactly how hybrid we really are. Most organizations already have the gray balls that you see listed on here. You've got physical assets that you're managing and maintaining with applications that run on physical assets. You haven't been able to virtualize these legacy apps, or they just don't fit or make sense to be virtualized. Then you have your static virtualization environment, usually running VMware or Hyper-V. You're probably going to maintain this long term, because if you put something in a cloud, whether it be your internal cloud that you're building out now or whether you put it out on the public cloud, you really don't want something that's just going to sit there consuming resources. You want applications that have a degree of transiency or degree of elasticity to go into those resources, because they're metered per hour, and you want to be able to use them where the meter fits. So you may build out an internal private cloud for test and dev, for production, for a variety of other uses, but more likely you're probably going to push more applications out to these outside services where you can get greater agility. Many of you will take even some of the legacy applications and move them out to traditional outsourcing. But a lot of what you'll do will go out to SaaS applications, public cloud platforms, and outside hosters who really only meter you on a per month basis or a per year basis. That allows you to optimize by putting the right application on the right type of infrastructure and replace the right applications with the right type of either service provider, hosted application, or SaaS application. The key here is to have a methodology that identifies the architecture of the application, the behavior of the application, the security needs of the application, and your own capabilities, and understand what the match is between all of your applications in your portfolio and those characteristics. At Forrester, we call this methodology strategic right sourcing, and I'm happy to tell you more about that, but find a method that allows you to manage this mix. Now, since you're going to have a mix, not just laying down the applications is a challenge, but the other challenge is how do you manage all of this? How do you lifecycle all of this? Well, given that your model is probably going to be a little bit like this picture, let's summarize what those needs are. First, there's a relationship in the cloud you have to understand. It's not an even handshake, it's an uneven handshake. When you're consuming cloud services, these cloud services are designed in a multi-tenant fashion, highly standardized, highly automated, and meant to provide the same capability to every single customer in exactly the same way. That means that when you look at the contracts, when you look at the SLAs, when you look at the features and capabilities provided from these cloud services, you can't change them. And you don't want to change them, because if you change them or if they agree to let you change them, they oftentimes have to set up a unique environment for you. And if they set up a unique environment for you, expect to pay more for that uniqueness. Expect to sign a multi-year contract and not get the cloud economics when you do that. So given that you want the cloud economics, you want the low price, you want the efficiency, you want the multi-tenancy that comes from these services, what should you do if their SLA doesn't meet your requirements, if they don't back up the way you want, or there's other needs that you have? You have to take responsibility for closing that gap. And in most cases with cloud services, you can close those gaps. You can close the gap if it's a cloud platform in how you architect your application, how you lay the application out, what it does, how you configure it, taking responsibility for backup and disaster recovery yourself, laying down clusters, and a variety of other tasks. If it's SaaS, what can you do is a discussion with the vendor. Do they do backup but not disaster recovery? Can you then set up your own disaster recovery? If you need to achieve a certain SLA, can you do so by combining the SaaS application with something you do on-premise? If you need to be protected from an outage, because who knows, you might have an outage at the exact time you can't afford it, you got to have a fallback plan. And when IT understands this part of the uneven handshake and what they can manage and how they can manage it, that's how you achieve the higher SLAs and the higher needs. Challenge number 2, I mentioned this several times, I don't think I can mention it enough, managing integrations. Almost all outside SaaS applications, application service provider, app hosting solutions are connected to something inside your data center. The best way to manage this is to have an integration architecture where you control the types of connections that come in, how they're managed, how they're maintained. Now, increasingly over time, as you build out more cloud-native functionality, you will get a demand from the developers for RESTful interfaces. They don't want ODBC and JDBC connections. They don't want SOAP connections. They certainly don't want proprietary connections or gateways. That means you're going to have, as part of your integration architecture, a RESTful interface and a set of API management tools and layers to achieve these objectives. Some of these are available in the cloud, and you'll be able to take advantage of cloud-based integration solutions. Others you'll need to lay down yourself internally. But get on top of this as quickly as you can. Work with your enterprise architecture team, work with your networking team, work with your development teams to get a clear architecture around how to manage integration. Third, operations. It's one thing to provision a cloud service. It's another to not have a clue whether it's meeting the SLAs, whether it's meeting the performance, whether it's securing your data. That's a responsibility you have to take on. How do I determine how I can manage and monitor these applications? What log formats come out? What dashboards can I create? What can I manage and monitor? And when these things are connected to my assets, and my assets are going to move from the data centers, the data warehouses that I maintain out into these services, can I still track and manage and maintain my assets when they make those transitions? This is where native cloud management tools become very valuable, where logging and dashboarding tools become incredibly valuable, but more importantly, understanding the individual services you consume becomes critical to your success. So let's look quickly at a few keys here to cloud success. First and foremost, I know that you know this, that your business is already using cloud services. The key thing is, how do you engage your customers? Because it's critical that you understand what they're using and why. Focus on the why. You don't want to stop the what. As I mentioned, it's too late. You don't get to stop the what. If you try to stop the what, you just look more and more like a hindrance to business success. So to be viewed as someone who's going to help them be successful, understand why they're using these services and how they're using these services. That will help you understand what the business case is, and you may find, by understanding the business case, how you can add value right up front. It might be that they're doing things where they're working off of a snapshot of the database that you have internally rather than working from the live database. And if they had access to the live database, they would have more accurate information that could deliver better customer service. That might be a place you say, I can help you there. You might find that the way they're using the service, because they're using a SaaS service they don't understand very well, they are putting your intellectual property up there without encryption. If you can suggest how they can still achieve those same objectives, still use that same service, but add encryption, you just added value. So always be looking at where can I add value to the business case when they articulate it to me. Don't listen to the business case and say, aha, here's how I stop them from doing this. If that's your objective, start over. Won't be successful. Next, don't think you know more about these cloud services than the employees who are using them. Get an account, learn, know. Then you can say how you can make this better. I can't tell you how many IT departments I talk to who know how many cloud services or know which cloud services they think are being used, but don't themselves have accounts on those services. You can't interpret their security capabilities. You can't understand what you can and cannot do on these services unless you've got an admin account yourself and can look into it. So put aside some budget to get accounts on these services so that you can play a more valuable role here. Next thing you should focus on, identify your own first use case. Rather than let the business continue to drive the adoption of cloud, look inside your own portfolio and say what services and capabilities that we're running ourselves today could we not run ourselves today, but pass on? What can we proactively move out into the cloud? Now, one of our clients did a very smart move here. He looked inside of the IT department and said, what part of my organization, my own organization, is going to be most resistant to using cloud services? And he thought that that would be his security team. And so he made them go first. He told them to take their security services, their DLP, their perimeter monitoring, their encryption tools, and switch them to cloud-based services. And by forcing them to do that, they've moved from being the department that always said no to things to the department that knew how to do things from this point forward. So make those kind of shifts. Push your organization outside their comfort zone so that using the cloud becomes comfortable faster. And then last, the problem a lot of us have in IT is we're really good at reporting, managing, and maintaining the technical aspects of the IT department's resources and the services that we use. We're usually terrible, unfortunately, at helping translate what we do and the value we have into business language. And this hurts us. This hurts us tremendously because if they're talking about profitability of delivery of product, if they're talking about ensuring the customer experience, speeding up customer satisfaction, and we come back with log reports, CPU utilization reports, network latency reports, none of those things are making any sense to the business. So change the way you do reporting by starting with the business case. That's why I said at the beginning, understand how they use these cloud services so you can understand how they are determining success with these services. Take that information, and your dashboard should be based on those measures of success. Translate what you do in technical language into business value, and then you'll have their ear from this time and all time forward. So hopefully, I know I've gone fast here, hopefully I've given you a good sense of how to use cloud services, catch the market, catch your business users, and embrace them so you can have success going forward. So at this point, Eric, back over to you.
Okay. Thanks, James. I appreciate that. That was some really good insight, and interesting for me is the guy's been working in the cloud, I guess, for 15 years now, and seeing some of the research that you guys are doing today really echo a lot of the business items that we run into when we're working with prospects who are looking at the cloud, but also existing customers. And one interesting note was how customers get into LoadSpring. And you really hit home some great points where getting to the cloud is really driven by the business units or developers internally who are bypassing IT. We have an example of a customer who started about 12 years ago precisely like that. They had an internal application that IT didn't want to touch, and they threw it over to LoadSpring, and you know, started as I think a $15,000 a year contract with this company. And over the years, they just kept throwing things over the fence at us, and it was really those business units that were doing it because IT didn't want to deal with it. Nobody was helping them. They weren't getting the responsiveness they wanted. So they just kept tossing things over to LoadSpring. And about 5 years ago, we realized that contract had grown to about $800,000 a year. And now it was starting to get internal business visibility. They called us skunk works at first, and then they said, okay, well, we can't do that anymore. And today it's well over a $6 million contract. So it actually, watching the evolution of how customers move to the cloud is precisely what you were talking about. It starts internally behind the scenes and then eventually gets too big, and we have to start really incorporating into the IT and business logic of the company to grow that account and really help the customer become business successful. What I'm going to talk about today, obviously we run a cloud services company. We've done this for over almost 15 years now, back when we used to be called an ASP. The business model that we've been in has changed so many times over the last 15 years, it's incredible. But we're still doing primarily the same function. We're providing applications in a cloud environment specifically focused around project management and program management. We host about 80 to 100 different core applications, and then probably another 30 or 40 applications on top of that may be one-offs for a particular customer. A lot of the points that I'm going to make today, and I'll keep this so that we have 5 or 10 minutes at the end, so I'm going to go rather quickly, but a lot of the points are really echoing what Forrester is seeing out in the industry. And I'll put a little bit of a twist in there, some things that we're seeing as people are trying to develop a cloud strategy. And I think that one of the slides that James presented is showing where customers were in 2012 compared to where they are today in 2014. We haven't really seen a massive migration to the cloud yet. Some of the points I'm going to mention are the friction that the IT organizations face in trying to get to the cloud. I think there's a big desire for organizations to get to the cloud, but as they look up into the sky, they're not really sure how to get there. And LoadSpring tries to provide a clear path to the cloud for our customers. Whoops. So here we go. So a lot of these are the same points that James was making. What do you need from the cloud? Well, you need hybrid environments with options to meet your business needs. We do, probably about 25% of our customers do have customized environments. We call those private clouds. So we do have to, LoadSpring has to be able to provide a standard cloud infrastructure that is good for the majority of the customers, but with particularly the larger enterprises, we need to have custom SLAs. We need to have custom master service agreements with different tweaks to those SLAs that meet the business objectives of different environments. We still try to align those from business to business for the customers to keep our IT staff sane, but we do see about 25% of our customers that need that customization, and they want that hybrid environment that meets their business needs. The provider, like LoadSpring, they have to understand the application and, more importantly, the infrastructure for those applications. I think that's a critical component for the cloud. Putting applications up into more of a generic managed services environment where the provider doesn't really understand the applications, that works for commodity type applications like Microsoft Word or Office type applications, but when you start getting into sophisticated database-driven business applications, you really need a cloud provider who understands those applications and how they set up and how they work. A good example of this, we do a lot with Oracle project management applications from Primavera. And if you look at one application, for example, their scheduling tool called P6, that application needs about 19 different servers and across web servers, Citrix servers, database servers, security servers, and Active Directory integration. And on top of that, there are about 5 different middleware products that all have to integrate and work together, such as BI for reporting or analytics. These are very complex infrastructures, and you need a cloud provider that kind of understands how all those applications talk to each other and how the infrastructure needs to be set up to give that performance that you expect. Solid integration capabilities with non-cloud applications. James, I think, did a great job showing that need and having that capability really to meet the business needs. And some people want APIs, some people want VPN direct connections, depending on the security needs. I mean, having a cloud provider who knows how to establish those connections to move data either from an on-premise solution into the cloud or move information from the cloud down to the on-premise solution. I've got a nice graphic that kind of shows why that's important. And then identity management. I think identity management is super underutilized in the enterprise businesses, at least in the United States today. I'm still surprised at how many large organizations do not have an identity management solution in-house. And identity management, I think, is key to success in the cloud. But you have to first get the enterprise to buy in that that's a good solution internally. So identity management, I would agree, makes the cloud easier. If you have one identity management service installed in your infrastructure, your IT organization owns that identity management solution, and then you work with the provider to pass that identity to them. That way the user's experience is much easier. They have one logon to remember, and the IT experience is much easier because if that employee were to leave the project or leave the company, they just remove the identity, and it removes the access to all the cloud services the enterprise is using. So we think this is really key. We're seeing less than 3 or 4% of our customers actually have an identity management solution, but won't even understand what its capabilities are. So I won't talk a lot about that in detail, but if anyone has any questions about that, they can certainly reach out to us after the webinar. And then a proven transition pathway for your applications. After 15 years of doing this, James had a nice slide kind of showing legacy applications kind of shrinking as more and more applications are becoming cloud-enabled and sophisticated. What we see is the path to the cloud, and one of the challenges of the path to the cloud is companies come to us and say, hey, our IT organization can no longer handle this complexity. We've got these new applications coming out. The software vendor is constantly trying to get us to move to the new versions of the applications, and we've got old versions of the applications that we're running, and we just want to move all that to the cloud. You guys take it. And what we find is that if you don't manage that transition and create a proven pathway for your particular applications, then you won't be successful, or it'll take you longer to become successful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that transition and what we do at LoadSpring to help with that transition. It's really a 2 or 3 step process to the cloud. It's not a, hey, take all my apps, all my data, throw them onto your data center and give me a login. You really need to go through a process of vetting that application, make sure it's ready for the cloud, and then you're assured success and a lot faster implementation. So this is what's going on in the corporate networks today. You have a lot of different applications running on-premise, and you may have put some of your applications out into the cloud. We just call them software 1, 2, and 3. This is what the cloud looks like for organizations today. And you're probably using 1 to 5 different cloud vendors in order to achieve that success. And you look at examples like Microsoft Azure. You may use Microsoft Azure for your Office applications, and then you might use a data center facility for another application. And this model, though it may have some cost savings associated with it, it may give you some more performance, it still starts creating an even more complicated IT infrastructure for enterprise companies. Because now they're not only managing their own infrastructure, but they're trying to manage multiple infrastructures at multiple different vendors. What we like to do is look at really a cloud environment that's more flexible. At LoadSpring, yes, we're focused very specifically on project management, but what we find is once customers move some of their project management applications into the cloud, they say, hey, can you guys do SharePoint? And what about graphics design applications like Revit? Or can you do some dashboarding systems and some estimating systems? And all of a sudden you have one cloud provider that's giving you that one-stop shopping for the infrastructure and the applications that you're trying to manage. And yeah, you probably will still be using Microsoft Azure for your Office applications, but you want to be very careful about having all of a sudden 10 or 15 cloud providers, because as what we see in the IT world is is they start going nuts trying to manage all these different clouds out there too. So you want to look for cloud providers that can provide more than one solution or one application or even one vendor of application. Oftentimes, the software vendors themselves are becoming cloud providers and trying to provide that solution. And if you love their software for a particular task, their cloud solution may be great. But if you like another software application for a different task and they want you to use their application, you're kind of starting to get in trouble. So you want to look at really a cloud provider who offers more than just one set of applications that can try to provide a more broad shift. So again, to James' point and the research that he's seeing, you really want your suite of applications. You don't want me to determine as a cloud provider what applications you should be using. Maybe you use me as a reference point for trying to understand what applications may be better, but at the end of the day, you want a flexible provider who's going to be able to host and manage your applications the way you want them to be managed. Your deployment timeline, typical IT deployment times for complex database-driven applications really can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months in our experience. You want a cloud provider who understands these applications and can deploy them in a matter of days, not a matter of months. You want to control your access across all your users. I've got a great graphic coming up. You want to manage your integration options. You want to make those choices, which applications are staying in-house, which applications you're integrating with the cloud. Obviously, your identity management solutions, your devices. You want to make sure that users can get to these applications from an iPad, an iPhone, an Android device, a web, a laptop. Wherever they are, you want them to be able to have access to this information, these applications. And obviously all of that performing very fast and consistently with 100% uptime 24 hours a day. So this is fundamentally, and I want to go as quickly as I can because you guys all know this. If you're running into cloud decisions moving forward, these are the types of users that you're dealing with: contributors, collaborators, consumers, and power users. And those users could be global. They often involve non-employees, so people coming in and using and accessing your information, but that you have no control over their devices. You obviously have your network employees and your joint ventures, business partners that we call co-opetition. Particularly in the construction industry, you may be working on a particular project with a business that on another project is your chief competitor. So how do you segregate and manage those users in the cloud is very big challenge for the IT organization. And then layered on top of that, you want this fast. You want some training. You want third-party integrations. You want great support to make sure it's all running. You need security. You want to deal with non-standard versions, particularly in the construction industry. When these guys start a 5-year project on version 4 of P6, they need to stay on version 4 for the term of that construction project for the next 5 years. They don't care if version 8's been shipping. They've got to stay on version 4. So you need to work with a cloud provider that's going to support that version, even if the software vendor stops supporting it. So these are all important considerations when you're looking into the cloud. And then, as you can see, you want this all working seamlessly with 20 different applications. So this becomes a very complex set of solutions for the enterprise, and this is one of the reasons why it's hard for organizations, particularly big ones, to get to the cloud. They're trying to solve all of these problems. So at LoadSpring, we understand this, and we try to provide some clarity really to turn it into something that looks more like this, where you have your network on the right and your employees. You have the cloud services on the left, identity management services in between that with a couple of different types of secure integration pipes in between. Now you just determine which applications you want to manage, which applications you want to put into the springboard at LoadSpring, and let the cloud take over. We're running out of time. I want to make sure I have a couple minutes for questions. Plan your software version strategy by matching it to your business objectives. What that means is if you're a company who's currently running a legacy application, and let's just use the example of Primavera P6, and you're running version 4, and you want to get to version 8. So version 4 is about a 6-7-year-old software platform, and you want to get to version 8, which is the most recent one. Make sure that you understand your version strategy and matching it to your business objectives. Does the new version do what you need it to do to match your business objectives? And then take a look at your business processes and your employee training prior to migrating to that new version. And then simultaneously test your existing software versions and business processes in the cloud. At LoadSpring, we don't let customers come to us. If they were running on version 4 of a particular application and they want to get to version 8, we don't start them on version 8 in the cloud. We actually start them on version 4 in the cloud. We make sure that everything works the way they expect it to with their version, and then we show them a UAT environment with the new version and their business process. And what you find is the business processes that worked fine for version 4 probably don't work so fine with version 8. So we help them migrate their business processes as well, so that now you have a seamless solution in the cloud, not one that's jammed into the cloud and hoping for the best. Compare your performance and software strategies for the new version in that UAT environment. Oftentimes the new software is heavier, more complicated, and its performance may not match what you're expecting. And then go ahead and activate your data and version strategy. Just a little bit look at LoadSpring. I'm going to skip really past that and move to the end and open it up for any questions or comments. We only have a few minutes left in the webinar. And if you do have any questions, go ahead and post them. Maybe we can take one or two over on the right. And if there's one that I need for James, I can pass over the control there. And if you don't have any questions because you want to jump over to the Apple launch today, that's okay too. Or maybe you type slow. I think we answered everybody's questions perfectly, James. I don't see any questions coming in. I want to thank everybody who attended the webinar today. Most importantly, I want to thank James for sharing the research that Forrester has done on the cloud. I think there's a lot of growth here for companies and a lot of questions that can be answered. So I want to thank everyone for their time today.